Hello, sweetie pies. Today we are going to continue studying about geology. Now we are going to be reviewing about Earth layers. Earth, remember, it's divided into four different layers. Okay, one inner layer that is round and solid, and then a thin, very thin crust. So the structure is made of four different layers. The first one it's called the crust. The second one is called the mantle. The third one is known as the outer core. And the last one is called as the inner core. The anatomy of the earth may look like this. Remember that we said before that if you cut earth in half, you will find something like this. Okay, the inner circle, it's called the inner core. Then we find the outer core. Then we have the mantle, which is the thickest layer, remember. And then we have the crust, that is the land that we stand on. And it is the thinnest layer of all. So, the earth layers start with the crust is made of granitic and basilica rocks. It also have silica, aluminum, and oxygen. And this crust is broken into pieces, which we called plates. Then we find the mantle, which is made mostly of iron, magnesium, and silicon. It is dense, hot, and semi-solid. Like the layers below, it circulates. Then we find the outer core, that this part is made from iron and nickel just in liquid form. It is up to 5,180 kilometers below the surface, and it is extremely hot. Last, we find the inner core, which is extremely dense. Dense means that it's tough, hard. It is made mostly of iron and nickel. The inner core spins a bit faster than the rest of the planet, and it's intensely hot. So remember, we have the thickness of the core of the layers, the inner core. Okay, remember that now we know that it's dense or hard, so it's a solid ball. And then we have, and it's extremely hot. It's the hottest of all. Then we have the outer core, which is liquid. It's liquid metal there. And it is also really hot. Then we find the mantle, which is semi-liquid. It's molten rock. And then finally we find the thinnest layer of all, which is the crust. It has two parts. One is made of basilic and the other is made of granitic rocks. So let's know a little bit more about the crust. Remember that Earth is made up of distinct layers, okay? So it has two parts. One part is called the continental crust, and the other part is called the oceanic crust. The continental crust is 30 to 40 kilometers thick, and it's made of most of it from less dense rocks, and it is less dense than the oceanic crust. Then we have the oceanic crust, which is from 5 to 10 kilometers thick and is made of primarily of basalt. It also can find diabase and gabbro, which are another kind of rocks and minerals. We find Earth's structure. Remember that we know that the crust is on top and it's made of the crust, granitic and basaltic rocks, and the ocean. We have, through the years of geologic time, many things happened on Earth that we will never know about. But using the evidence we have, people have been able to distinguish different part of geologic time. As you do, you may think about what you see around and think about how it might have been different at different times in Earth history. Let's see if you can understand more about why Earth is like it is and how it got to be this way. Perhaps mountains have not been there always. Elements such as wind, water, ice, and gravity cause erosion and weathering, which means that it changes the Earth face. What do all these processes do to the Earth's thin layer of skin or crust, how we now know that it is called? The crust under the ocean is about 6 kilometers, more or less, thick, and it is more dense than the crust that is under the land. The crustal changes we've talked about so far have taken places throughout geologic time, but most occurred during the Cenozoic era. We will be studying these eras deep in the future. It is the most recent period of geologic time. And during this time, glaciers, earthquakes, volcanoes, and climate changes have affected the planet. This we know because evidence of geologic history can also be found in fossils. Remember that we know that fossils are traces or remains of plants and animals. And studying these fossils in rocks can tell you about the climate of time in geologic history. Sometimes people can find similar fossils in different areas in rock layers of the same age. So this means that the climate of the two places was similar while these sediments were being laid down. This is just a peek of what geologists have learned, and now they teach us. So over here we know, because of these evidences, that the Earth's crust is made of less dense rocks, granitic and basalt. And then we know that the mantle is made of silicate materials, among others. The outer core we know that is liquid iron. And then we have the core, which is dense and hard, iron with nickel. The crust is the outermost layer of the planet. The Earth's crust occupies less than 1% of Earth volume because it's the thinnest. The crust of the Earth is made up of a great variety of igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary rocks. Some of these less dense rocks, such as granite, are common in the continental crust, but rare in the oceanic crust. The crust and underlying relatively rigid, it's hard, mantle make up the lithosphere, which is broken into pieces called plates. And these plates move. How do we know all this? Okay, for sure, we know that Earth crust is broken into pieces. Now we know that they are called plates. So Earth crust pieces are known as plate tectonics, and they consist in Earth crust and part of the upper layer of the mantle. Why do they move? Because the currents in the fluid rock, remember that the mantle is fluid rock, make them plates move, and they move in different directions. So let's talk about the second layer, which is the mantle. So we may be thinking of how do scientists know this much? They theorize that the Earth formed from a spinning cloud of dust and gases. So, how did we end up with this? Well, we'll find out soon. So, mantle, remember, made of silicate materials and is the second layer from the top down. So, the Earth mantle is a layer of rocks of 2,900 kilometers thick. It is beneath the crust. It is semi solid. The top of the mantle is partly fluid. These liquid rocks flow and move under the earth crust, and the crust is broken into plates that move on top of this fluid piece. Then we have find the outer core, which we know already that it was liquid. So the outer core is under the mantle. The outer core is a layer of liquid metal. It is magma like liquid, and the layer that surrounds the inner core and creates this layer is the one that creates the Earth magnetic field. The alloy of the outer core is a very hot. It's incredibly hot. Finally, we will find the inner core or the fourth layer. So it's the deep inside Earth, and it's made, remember, of iron and nickel. So we know that it's beneath or under the outer core. It sits or stands in the center of Earth, and it's a solid ball of iron and nickel. Scientists theorize that Earth formed from a spinning cloud of dust and gases in space. So the gravity pulled the more dense iron and nickel inward to form the inner core. Even though we think rocks of the surface of Earth are heavy, the materials in the inner core are much, much more dense. So the layer of Earth has cooled and hardened, forming a crust over the planet. But Earth's interior has remained very hot. It is made of molten rocks and gases that they continue to erupt from beneath the surface. Now we know that the lightest materials formed an outer layer of gases. So remember, the Earth is about 4.6 billion years old. A lot has happened in that time, and we will be learning from it soon. Thank you for your attention. Oh, before you go, I have a new riddle for you. So let's see, what do you think? What is worse than finding a worm on your apple? Hmm, think hard. Well, yes, maybe that's it. For those of you who do not know, I will tell you, finding half a worm is worse. That means that you ate the other half. Well, bye bye. See you later, alligators.